So as long as I play the notes of the chord and land on those notes, it's going to sound good, no matter what. At least. Does that make sense? So outlining the sound of the chord. Obviously, if you want to play different chords, you know, like a minor, for example. So it's a different sound, right? There's basically three kinds of chords. There's a major chord, a minor chord, and something called a dominant. So this has something called a flat seven and a major third. So, but you know, there's really only three kinds of chords. But so as long as you're outlining the chords, you're going to sound decent. It's kind of an important sort of concept. I think a lot of people forget sometimes. You know. Anyway, I'm going to move along the theory stuff. I don't want to get too much into it. You know, so another thing, I'll move to rhythms and stuff. Does anybody have any questions about that, or about scales or chords or anything like that? So another thing that was kind of a eureka thing when I went to Humber. Like I was saying, my reading wasn't very good. It's still not great, but you know, reading and counting rhythms are really important. So I remember one class with my rhythm teacher. There was a fellow named Roger Flock. I don't think he's there anymore, but he showed me this thing for reading rhythms. And where is it now? So I wrote this out yesterday. It's basically an easy way to read rhythms. So if you got a bar of 4/4, it's right here. There's 4/4. There's the whole bar. You've got this. I put this dotted line in the middle. It's kind of an unwritten rule. Well, it's given that you're really not supposed to write over the third beat like this. But so if you look at 2 beats at a time, you'll be able to read the whole bar quickly. So there's only 7 different combinations that you can have. You can have 2 quarter notes, like this. So if you count, this would be 1, 2, like that. So you can have it either the first half of the bar or the second half. Either on 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. Does that make sense? So the other thing you can have is 4/8 notes. So you'd have 1 and 2 and. And again, that could be in the last half of the bar as well, which would be right here. I left it blank. Then you start combining them. So you've got a quarter note and 2/8 notes. 1, 2, and. That's how you read this third rhythm here. And then the opposite of that would be 1 and 2. And again, you can have that in the second half of the bar. And then once you put a dot on a note, that increases the value by 1/2. So this one is 1 and 2 and. And then the opposite of that is underneath here. You've got 1 and 2 and. So that covers your 4/8 notes like that. Then the other one is this combination, 1 and 2 and. And that's it. So if you look at any of these tunes in this jazz fake book, there's no other rhythmic examples than that. I'll show you a couple tunes. So I mean, there's still, it's written out really basically, but it's all quarter notes, and there's some whole notes and stuff like that. But you can see it's all just quarter notes and stuff like that. There's another harder example I'll show you in a sec here. There's a tune called Anthropology by Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. It's a bebop tune, which is, you know, crazy kind of music. But if you look at it, it's all these combinations of 8th notes and quarter notes. And if this is a rest here, can you see my pointer? So basically, if you substitute a rest with a note, it's the same thing. So these are all these combinations of 7 different combinations of quarter notes and 8th notes. So you can look at 2 beats at a time and read really quickly. This is 1, 2, and. Then the second half of this bar is 3 and 4 and. So it's really easy to decipher. You look at it really quick and you start just visualizing how it is. So you know, and we would have to count and clap all these rhythms. So we'd do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. We'd have to do all this in class, and you'd have to conduct it, you know. So conducting is another thing that I learned at school, which was really helpful. It's just the pattern of, you know, you see it on TV, people just going like this. So this is basically beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. So if you're trying to figure out where notes are, rhythms and everything, and if you got a rhythm, ba, 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 it shows you where the notes are, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and like that. So you can kind of keep your place with that kind of thing. So it's important to know your place when you're playing a tune, so you don't get lost. Anyway, I think this is, I'll try to move this along. So it's kind of important stuff if you're gonna be reading and playing with other musicians and all that kind of stuff like that. So how am I doing so far? Any other questions about like that kind of thing, or? So yeah, I'll go to the next section now. I guess it's about gear, equipment, and all that kind of stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff you can buy. The store is great here. I mean, Kevin is in charge of the store, and anything that you would ever need to be a musician is in this store right here. So we've got guitars, we've got amplifiers, any kind, bass amps, pedals. The band department is right over here. If you need a saxophone, if you gotta get microphones for a gig or mic stands, this is the place to do, and they've pretty much got everything here. But you gotta figure out what you need exactly. Obviously, you need a decent guitar, and this is kind of appropriate for the Rock of Ages thing. It's basically an 80s kind of setup. It's got something called a Floyd Rose. So, you can get some funny sounds with it. It'll stay in tune no matter what I do. So, it'll do some crazy things. So, it's appropriate for that kind of music, but so, I wouldn't take this on a jazz gig. You'd be like, what is that? Get that away from here, I remember when I first went into lessons at Humber College, I brought my Les Paul, and I thought, man, I'm gonna get, ridiculed for taking my Les Paul to a jazz school or whatever, but I studied with a guy named Lorne Lofsky, who's probably one of the best jazz guitar players in the country, if not the world. And I'm like, oh yeah, man, sorry, I brought my Les Paul. And he's like, oh, no way. He's like, I used to play a Les Paul. So I felt like, oh wow, okay, good. This guy's cool. So, it all depends, right? I can get a jazz sound with this, but I probably wouldn't take it to a jazz gig. So you gotta have the right gear, and you gotta cater your amps and everything to where you're playing, like if you're playing a small club, you're not gonna bring a big Marshall stack. I remember going to a place called Einstein's. I used to play there. I'm sure my friends know about it. I used to do this live karaoke thing, and I used to bring my little Fender amp or whatever, because it's not that big of a room, And I went to see a band there one time, and both guitar players had Marshall 4x12 stacks. I'm like, oh my God, you're gonna knock down a wall with that thing. It's like using a sledgehammer to put up a nail in the wall for a picture. It's just overkill. You don't need that. If you're playing Maple Leaf Gardens, you'd use an amp like that. The first time I did one of the bigger shows I've ever done, I opened up for Ted Nugent at the Sudbury Arena, and I brought my combo with my 4x12, and I cranked it up, and the soundman is like, what are you doing? I heard him screaming at me from the soundboard. He's like, turn that effing thing down. I'm like, it's an arena. I can play as loud as I want. He's like, no, turn it down. I'm like, oh, good God. So 9 times out of 10 when you show up on a gig, it's too loud. So if you think you can bring a big wall of Marshalls, it's not. If you see that, most of them are fake. The only guy that does that is Yngwie Malmsteen, and nobody likes him anyway. He's amazing, but it's true. I just saw a picture. Did you guys see the picture of You know, on the cruise, he brought like 22 Marshall heads and 18 cabinets, and everybody's like, oh, good God! But you know, he's Bay, he can do whatever he wants.
What do you use it for Rock Vegas?
It's a good question. I forgot to take a picture of it. It's all direct on the ship. It's a rack mount thing by a company called Fractal Audio. You guys probably heard it. Do you guys sell it here, Kevin?
I think it's direct.
It's direct. Yes, you're right. So it's a company called Fractal Audio. It's like a rack mount thing, and this thing is amazing. The model is called the Axe FX2, and it has literally hundreds. It's all done through algorithms and computer programs and stuff. They model the sounds of like that Mesa, so you can dial in the sound of that amp or that Marshall over there or the Eddie Van Halen 5153 head, which is what I used actually to do the show with. You know, I mean, I had sort of free range of what amp I wanted to use for the show. I did that because on the show in Toronto, they had the actual Eddie Van Halen 5153 heads and cabinets. The cabinets were in a room under the stage in actually like a road case. They were in an isolated thing. They were mic'd up inside of a road case because they're just ridiculously loud, right? So they'd have to be isolated. But for the show on the ship, it was direct, and we were on in-ear monitors, so there's no cabinets or anything on stage. Everything is like totally quiet. And on the ship, we have something called an Aviom system. So it's just an in-ear thing, and you basically mix yourself. If I wanted more drums, I'd turn the drums up a little bit. If I wanted more of the bass guitar, I could turn that up, and you know, the click, because the show is on a click, and you know, so we had those. And I had a little pedal board I could set up to do different patch changes and stuff if I wanted to go from like a really rockin' solo sound to a clean sound for some things, you know, like so there's some ballads in the show, so I'd have like a clean sound set up for something like that. So there's a pedal board set up to change the sounds and stuff like that.
Is that an Axe FX pedal board as well, or is it
this thing that I got?
you use on the show?
It's made by the same company. Yeah, they have their own foot controller that controls the actual unit itself, and the pedal, the rack mount thing. I think they're about $2,500 US. It's pretty expensive, but I mean, if you get that, it's basically got 300 different kinds of heads. I mean, Marshalls and Boogies and Fenders and Diesels and like every amp you can imagine. Hundreds of amps, different, like all kinds of cabinets, 212 with these speakers, 112, 412, closed back, open back, you know, mic in different spots and pedals up the wazoo, you know, phaser pedal, fuzz, like everything. And you basically design your whole rig to be to anything you want with those things. It's quite amazing, and you can use that actually in line with a regular guitar amp. It's got like a speaker sim, and so you can turn that off if you want to use, you know, the preamps to go through an actual cabinet or whatever. Like, they're pretty amazing. So it's there's a lot of people using them. They're kind of industry standard now. So, but yeah, and they sound amazing. So so it's great. Yeah.
Gino, I have a question.
Yes.
My name is Shane, longtime listener, first-time caller. We actually can't stick around. We've got to take off and get ready for Showroom. But I thought you might be able to speak something to the idea of knowing your limitations and playing within them as it pertains to being a professional. The idea of actually learning your craft before you step on a stage and present it. That being what I consider to be the most important factor in becoming a professional is knowing when to step on stage and what to do and what not to do. And what you don't do is stuff that you're not yet comfortable with, both as a player and as a band. I thought you might be able to speak a little to that.
That's a really good question, actually. Knowing your limitations. So yeah, so like, I mean, if you're like a really good rock player, you know, and somebody calls you on the phone and says, hey man, I got this great jazz gig, you know, like it's paying $400, and you're going, yeah man, I gotta do that, that's awesome, right? And you step on the bandstand, and then the band leader throws you a bunch of charts like this and says, okay, let's do Satin Doll in D flat. And you'd be like, oh boy, you'd be screwed, to say the least. So that's a good point, knowing your limitations. So like, I mean, if you don't have experience doing that kind of thing, say no to the gig. Say, no, man, that's not me. I can't do that. So I might know somebody that can do that. You know, call this guy. You know, so knowing your limitations and that way, right? So personally, as a player, you know, sometimes as a full band or whatever, you know, if you're some bands, if you're in a basement for a long time like that, and you know you're trying to play like Rush or something that has all kinds of key changes and time changes and stuff like that, and like if you don't know what you're doing, you know, don't go to a jam night and try to do that because it's just gonna look bad, you know. I was at a jam recently where some people tried to get on stage and play like, you know, ZZ Top, LaGrange, and you know, the time feel was just really bad. And then the harmonica player got up and he was playing harmonica like in the wrong key. You know, like if you play harmonica, you have to have a harmonica for all 12 keys of the cycle of fifths that show you. So if you get on stage and if you got a harmonica that plays, you know, in this key, you're not gonna try to play over. It's gonna be like totally wrong. You know what I mean? You're gonna be in the wrong key. I remember like everybody in the bar was like, "Oh my God, what is going on?" It was really bad. I don't want to say when or where it was, but
No names.
It was. It was not jazz. No, jazz is actually pleasing when it's done properly. If you're playing jazz, you know, if you know how to go in and out of the key, it's actually, if it's done right, it's actually really cool. It's pretty hip. But if you're like playing in the wrong key for like more than like 2 seconds, it's painful. So there was some limitations there. Anyway. Shane, does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Gino.
Anyway, say bye to Shane and Darren. These are some good buddies of mine. They were nice enough to come out.
Stop by tonight. Stop by after you're done. Grab.
Okay, all right. So,
Bring these guys with you.
anyway, say bye to Shane and Darren. Thanks, guys, for coming up. So, yeah, limitations. I mean, you know, again, what's the saying? So either you're a rock guy who plays jazz or you're a jazz guy who plays rock, you know? I think I'm a rock guy who can play a little bit of jazz, but, you know, vice versa. If you're a jazz guy, you're not going to take like a heavy rock gig because it's going to be embarrassing. You're going to get on the bandstand and, you know, people are going to ask you to rock out and, you know, you're going to be like playing Charlie Parker licks on AC/DC tunes. It just doesn't work, you know? So just say no to the gig. Say, you want a rock guy? Call this guy. Call somebody else, you know. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the better thing to do. So hopefully that answers that question.
You definitely rock.
What's that?
You definitely rock.
I'm definitely rock. Oh, thanks, everybody. That's Jeff. So we play in a band together. Thanks, buddy. So yeah. So you know, that kind of gets to the last part of my thing of just taking gigs and stuff like that. You know, I've been lucky to do some really cool gigs. I'm doing this Rock of Ages thing. I've also done some gigs with a thing called Classic Albums Live. So, are you guys familiar with Classic Albums Live at all? I've done Dark Side of the Moon in Kansas. I did a couple shows with them, and then I did
Zeppelin 2, right?
I did Zeppelin 2 in Milton a few weeks back. I don't have any video from that. I tried to get it, and I couldn't rip it or whatever, but that went really well. And the other show I did was Rumors, which was really tough because if you guys know Fleetwood Mac stuff, I mean, Lindsey Buckingham is it's just like right hand stuff. It's crazy. You know, and I again, knowing my limitations, I'm like, I can't do that. I let the other guy do it, you know? So going back to Shane's question, I'm like, you know, there's one tune, I can't remember what it's called, Never Going Back Again. But it's a lot of like right hand stuff. It's amazing. Like the guy's great. Lindsey Buckingham is his name, and I worked on it for a couple of days. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get this in time for the show. So the other guy covered the tune, you know? So I accepted my limitations. I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. You do it. So, you know.
The U.S. location list, or
Sorry?
were you